How's it going? What I want to do this morning is kind of discuss what happened with my boat. I just bought this boat. It had about 119.8 hours on it when I bought it. And I'll just kind of go through everything I had to do with this boat within 4 hours of owning it. So you want to be extremely careful when you buy a used boat. There was some signs that things were wrong with it, but I just ignored it basically. So let me explain, well, just some brief things. I did replace the skag. I had Prop MD in Plymouth fix that. It looks beautiful. They prime it, paint it, and they make sure that the welder doesn't get too hot so it burns out the seals. Then I put a new prop on it because the prop was banged up and it was cavitating because it had some nicks in it. So that was a couple things I did. I got 2 receipts here, equal $2,500 worth of work. And I got a box of parts here. I'm gonna kind of go over everything and explain why I needed to do all this stuff and things that I did preventative to make sure that nothing happens it again for the next like 7 years basically. So the problem I had basically was I used the boat, it had old gas and it didn't run for like 3 years. So what I did is I just tried to burn the old fuel out. So I went out one day, it was kind of cooler out, I put like an hour and a half on it. The next time I went out, I put about another hour and a half on it, and it was also cool out and it ran fine, but I didn't really put a load on it because I'm not a guy that, you know, digs the low end in. I'm either going slow or I'm just on plane so it doesn't, you know, work the motor too hard. So I'm very careful on boats. So the shift cable, it has a crack in it. Let's see here. So the shift cable has some cracks in the bellow here, and it had a wore through spot right here. So what will happen is the water will get in there, it'll rust the cable and it won't slide very easy. And I noticed that the cable was hard shifting, so I had to do that. That was one thing, the shift cable. And basically I was just gonna have them do the impeller kit, which I brought the part in, and it's about a $250 job. They pull the whole thing off to inspect everything. And then when they got inside, they noticed that everything was kind of melted down. The water tubes were melted down. There's another piece that's inside my house that's completely like a glob of plastic. And what happens when these get hot, these get warped a little bit, and then they won't seal. So that was one thing for sure that had to get done. They need impellers. I talked to the mechanic and he said these bigger impellers for the generation 2, you don't have to do them for like, I said 3 years. He said, well, his brother didn't do one for 12 years because they're more forgiving because the fins are bigger. On the generation 1, the fins are smaller and they're less forgiving. You can burn one out within 30 seconds of running it dry, which I never run a boat dry. Then when they had the lower end off, they called me and they said, hey, your gimbal bearing is bad. I said, no way. It's got 119 hours on the boat. There's no way it's bad. It's almost brand new. So I went in there. I'm not gonna take it out because it's greasy. And I put my hand in the bellow and I felt the bearing. It was completely shot. He said it was the worst bearing he felt all season. So then I put up my finger in another boat next to it and I felt that one. I'm like, wow, that is nice. So obviously I had to do the gimbal bearing, so I had to do the gimbal bearing. It's inside the transom, kind of right in the transom wall, which it, you know, makes the drive shaft go smoother. But I wasn't hearing any noise, but it was a little rough and I felt it and it was bad. So gimbal bearing, shift cable, impeller, and everything kind of in the impeller hosing was all melted down, so water wasn't exactly getting a tight seal to go in. When I bought the boat, there wasn't exactly that much water coming out, and that was one sign that I knew something was wrong. So it wasn't really kicking out that much water. I should have not ignored that. There's another piece, you know, I don't know if you can see that, it's completely melted down. So this is not even bad compared to the part that I have in my room, which was like the top part. It completely melted off. So that, you know, those are things that would prevent the water from pumping actually into the motor. And because it didn't pump all the way in the motor, there's other things that I had to fix. Let me show you. Okay, since the water pump wasn't sealing correctly because everything was melted down, and there's evidence that this boat was overheated before I bought it. And I kind of ignored this sign. I don't know if you can see this, but that is completely destroyed. And what happened is it overheated and melted this down. And the owner before me just put some rubber on it to cover it up basically because it was leaking exhaust in here. And the reason why I know it was leaking exhaust in here because it was covered in black soot. This motor, like I said, only had 119 hours. So it shouldn't be black in here. It should kick the exhaust out of the rear of the boat. So that's another sign that I missed. You know, black soot and this rubber piece, which went over the exhaust boot going to lower end, was covering up a complete meltdown. So this is the other one. This one's even worse. This is awful. Look at all that, the holes in there. Completely melted down. I mean, this is absolutely awful. And here's more rubber that was covering up the holes. So obviously they had to take off the exhaust manifolds, new gaskets, which is great. I like new parts. And so that was kind of causing all the meltdown, or like basically the motor went into hydrolock, and I'll explain that shortly here. So then it needed a new cap and rotor. It was the fuel water separator was never changed in this boat. It was completely rusted. When I took it off, it was completely full of water. This boat is a 2001, so that's, you know, 18 years old. This boat, let's see, 2001, yeah, 18 years old. The cap and rotor was never changed, which I usually like to change mine every year. It's all green in here. It's got cracks all over the place. It's just completely disgusting. You know, that's the cap and rotor. Here's the rotor for this. So what else I had them do is, because they were in there, I was like, you might as well just put new spark plugs in, because they had the manifolds off, and I want them to fix it correctly, because like I said, it went into hydrolock, and I wanted them to figure out exactly why it went into hydrolock. So what else they did is they did the timing, change the oil and fluid, water pump, exhaust manifolds came off, put the new boots on the side, which I'm going to show you in a second, new spark plugs, and they changed the oil 4 times to get all the water out of the motor. So what happened is, after I got done pulling a skier for the first time, I was less than 4 hours on the boat since I owned it, and I pulled up to get the skier and shut it off, and it stumbled. It dieseled, basically, is what they call it. It was like blub blub, blub blub, blub blub, blub blub. So basically, and I tried to start it, wouldn't start. Motor is basically locked up. So what happens is the motor runs in reverse, sucks water in through the exhaust manifold into the motor, and completely filled the whole motor up full of water. Awful thing. So then I'm stuck on the lake on July 5th, you know, 2019. Less than 4 hours on this boat I bought. You know, awful situation. I have guests that I brought up to my cabin, and it was just awful. So in order to unhydrolock the motor, I paid them to do it. So they have to take the spark plugs out, pump all the engine oil out of the motor, turn it over a few times. Like I said, change the oil 4 times because it was so full of water. Now the oil is perfectly clean, but that was after 4 times of an oil change. So what I got in the receipts here, the first invoice was hydrolock motor, won't turn over, change oil 4 times from crankcase. I did a tune-up, that was the cap and rotor, spark plugs, and they put my water pump in. So, I mean, the parts alone cost $227, which is not so bad. They changed the oil 4 times. The oil was $115, and the labor was $625. You know what? That's not that bad for that. So basically, the bill was about just short of $900 to fix the hydrolock, do a cap and rotor, do plugs. He thinks it's because the distributor cap was so bad and it was overheated and it wasn't exactly getting fresh cooling water. This manifold got really hot. This one didn't. So I was talking to him and he said that they should have cooled at the same rate. So now on the second receipt here, what I have, they had to, you know, take off the exhaust manifold, put new gaskets on. Oh yeah, the water flappers. So there's flappers in the exhaust manifolds in the bottom back here. I'll kind of show you that. And what they do is when you hit the exhaust, they kind of close like this, or open, so the exhaust can run through. And when it's not running, they stay shut. So if you back up your boat in the water, have a lot of weight in the back, stop quickly, the water can't go into the motor because these flappers close. The flappers were completely melted down, and they were in the lower end, which was awful. And there was also water in the lower end, not in the gear case, but you could tell that the water wasn't going up the holes and was filling up the lower end full of water. We found that out. I found that out when I was there. They literally saw that when I was there. And then they did shift cable, gimbal bearing, water, you know, like I said. So we got about $525 in parts, over $1,000 in labor on that. So now I talked to him, and it looks like that'll be everything on this boat. I mean, basically, unless I want to rebuild the motor, there's really not much else they can do. That's pretty much everything. The boat was in awful condition. He said it was because it sat too long and it wasn't maintained, which I agree with. What else? I'm just going to show you the shift cable, the boots that they took off, and the distributor cap now. So just remember, you have to maintain your boat right. Make sure it's pumping the right amount of water, and look for signs that there was overheating. Now when I got the boat back, it has 128 hours on it, which they put more hours on the boat in the shop than I actually did using the boat, which is crazy. So they doubled the hours that I actually had personally used. So now the boat has 128 hours. It's 18 years old. Everything is replaced, so it should be good now. I got to put the back bench in, final some things up. I did the blower hose on here, which I'm going to do another video of explaining why a blower motor is so important in an inboard boat. You know, and there's just some things I kind of did to make it better. But I mean, just look at that. That is awful. I've never seen something so melted down in a boat. So all in all, between all the work that I had done, it was about $2,600 worth of work. But I did the shift cable, water pump, the flappers inside the exhaust, cap and rotor, you know, spark plugs, tune up, oil change, lower end oil change. I should be good for at least 100 hours until I have to do the lower end oil change. But I have to winterize the boat, so I'll dump it at that point. So there's the boots that, you know, had to get replaced, that were all melted through because the exhaust manifold melted everything down from the heat. And there was signs, you know, but I ignored them. So that was a mistake. And there's the cap and rotor, you know, new down there, cap and rotor that I had to get replaced, and the shift cable. So they adjusted the shift cable and the idle and everything on here. So hopefully now I should be good for at least 5 years. At least 5 years. And there's a new starter I put in it. You know, new battery. You know, basically everything on this motor that could get replaced is replaced. So hopefully it runs perfectly for the next 5 to 7 years without having any maintenance. So there you go. That's kind of my nightmare of this boat that I just bought. Less than 4 hours on it. And boat should have 2 T's on it. You know, boat bust out another 1,000. It should have 2 T's in the end, bust out another 2,000 or 3,000. In my case, 2,500. So hopefully everything goes better for you. I think after this point, I asked the mechanic, what's the situation of the boat? Do I need to sell it right away? How's the integrity of the motor? He goes, no, the boat is great now. It's in better condition probably than it has been since it was brand new. So I'm trusting that. And if there's any problems with it, I'm gonna bring it back to Bayside Marina. They're great. Dan at Bayside Marina on Lake Minnetonka is great. Thank you guys for fixing my boat. I appreciate it. Please hit like and subscribe. I'm gonna need the revenue on this video, so click the ad. Just kidding. Have a good day. Bye.